Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 2015 Cavallo webinar series. I hope you've all had a fabulous festive season and Happy New Year. And for those of you back east, I hope the weather isn't too terribly severe for you and you're still getting out to visit your horses. We are really delighted to start the year by bringing back the acclaimed Dr. Teskey. I know you're all looking forward to this information from the well-versed authority on horses. And Dr. Teskey, you know, he's made the study of horse physiology his life's work. He studied horses from the ground, or shall we say hoof up. But it's not just about the science, you know. He lives with his own horses too, and you'll soon learn that just from hearing him talk, he not only understands, and I mean really understands horses, he loves horses as much as we do. Dr. Teskey is a barefoot advocate, and we know that this area of horsemanship is fast gaining solid ground. Barefoot and booted is growing significantly. We know this firsthand at Cavallo from the interest, the questions, the calls, the emails we receive every day, all day long. Thank you for attending this webinar. We have well over 1,300 registrants in the classroom. And I know classroom sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? You know, some people have asked, how does a classroom fill up, you know, when it's virtual? It's not like you're occupying a limited number of chairs or can't fit in the room or anything like that. So just to clarify, we actually pay for this broadcasting service, and we pay by the amount of attendees in advance. So if we speculate that we're going to have, say, 2,000 listeners, that's what we pay for. And if more show up, then they get the message that the webinar is full. So just so you understand. Oh, also there's been some funny comments. Let me just advance the screen. Funny comments about the title, Horses Can't Go Barefoot, where people have read the subject heading, differed in opinion, and then sent us emails arguing why horses can, in fact, go barefoot. So to those of you, I apologize that the title was misleading. Of course, we at Cavallo are absolute barefoot advocates. We want horses to be comfortable. So the objective of this webinar is for Dr. Teskey to tell us all what we need to know to make sure that our horses can go comfortably barefoot, and also by telling us that alternately and also why they can't. And now, without further delay, please welcome Dr. Tomas Teskey, World Authority on Barefoot Horses. Hello, Thomas.
Hi, Carole. It's nice to be here. How does that sound on your end?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Hope it's okay for everybody. These technology can be a little challenging.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully this is going to sound good for everybody and we won't cut out too much. But yeah, I remember when we discussed putting together this webinar and how, you know, so many of our questions that we get from people focus around the difficulties that they're having, and, you know, they're real. Go ahead and go to that next slide, and let's start talking about what it really means to have a perspective, and how do you know what you know. How good of a listener are you to me, to other people in authority, to yourself? How well do you listen to your horses? Are you a good observer? Do you really see what's there? So when somebody talks to me and says that their horse just can't go barefoot, I don't argue with them, because
right.
in their perspective, that is true. And far be it from me to argue with them. Now what I'm going to do is just respectfully listen and find out, so what's going on? Tell me about your horses. Tell me about where you live. What part of the world? What part of the country? How many do you have? What do you feed? You know, all these other questions that start to come up. And all of a sudden, through some thoughtful questioning and discussion around the subject, we start to see that our perspective starts to change because of what we thought we knew or what we maybe didn't realize was also taking place. So the question is, what if? What kind of perspective can we come up with that does allow for horses to be sound on their own feet without the use of steel horseshoes? And so this webinar is a thoughtful invitation to look at some of those reasons. And they are real. This is a very compassionate approach on my part to really explore this subject. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me and see what we have. When we talk about hooves, I can remember a time 15 years ago when I was very, very focused on hooves, and I missed a lot. My eyes were always on horses' hooves, and more, the more I learned, the more I look at the whole horse. When I grab up one of my horses to go for a ride, I rarely pick up their feet anymore to look at what's going on underneath there. I will if there's, obviously, if they're not acting sound or something, maybe there is a rock caught in there or something. But the point of this slide is that we can get really focused on the way hooves look, and it's also super important to take the whole horse into perspective. And there's so much more than just the horse too. There's that environment that's around that horse there. What is that horse walking on? Are there other horses around? How much space? So anybody that talks to me anymore, all of a sudden I'll be asking them, so what do you feed your horse? And they're like, no, that's not what the problem is. I have a hoof problem. And I said, oh, I know. And I would really like to know what your horse's diet is like. So that's a good example of the whole horse consideration. Let's see what else.
Well, I certainly remember that when I first got involved with horses' feet, it's all I could look at.
Right. Yeah, look at the next slide and see what else I have coming up here to consider. So we talk about space requirements for horses, and are there minimum space requirements for horses? Can you call up an animal control officer or a trainer or anybody else that's an authority on horses and have them tell you what the minimum space requirements are for a horse? What would that be? Would it be the size of a stall? Would it be the size of a stall plus a run? Would it be an arena? Would it be a pasture? Would it be multiple acres? The point of this slide is to let you know that horses in confinement are unhealthy, period. Horses that cannot move freely with other horses with enough room to walk, trot, and canter at liberty and with some amount of freedom to move and turn directions and kick up their heels, that is not enough space. So if you have your horse in a situation where you don't have that kind of space available, that's one thing you can work on. It's so important. I'm not gonna gloss this over. The minimum space requirements for horses, to my mind, is at least half the size of a football field, because with or without a track built around it or within it, could have round pens attached, but it's very, very critical to have enough space for horses. That freedom of movement is absolutely magical when it comes to the health of that animal. These animals evolved on the move. So if we lock them up, I can list 100 different problems, clinical, medical problems that your horse may end up with if they spend too much time in a stall or confinement. Next slide. There's a lot of cool ideas out there for for utilizing the space that you have. We're building track systems around the edges of our fields so that horses don't always have access to that forage, that green grass, or maybe you're trying to get your pasture to grow back. Maybe you can rotate certain areas where your horses have access certain times and not at others. And just providing that track stimulates horses to move. So you add space, you add variety to your environment, horses start to move on their own. You don't need to add a whole lot of whooping and hollering to get them to move. They like to do it. You get horses out working and playing too. They like to go. They like to do a job. So how often do you play with your horse? How often do you work with your horse? You do your work in the arena. You do your dressage. You do your round penning. You do your team penning and your rodeo events, your endurance riding, your training. These are all really good activities because the horses are moving. The horses that are the healthiest and the soundest are the ones that move the most, period. Next slide. Underneath that oak tree there's a little burro back in there hiding. The burros are quite a bit different. I wanted to say a little something about them because they're so wonderful. They have a little bit different strategy for survival. They like to get camouflaged and hide, and they'll be a little sneakier about it, but they don't oftentimes run away too much. Sometimes they'll turn around and kick and bite if you chase them too much. So they have a different strategy, but they have to have room too. And it's best for your mules and donkeys to have a lot of rock as well. Well, a lot of the hoof problems we see in our mules and donkeys is because the ground is too wet and too soft. Then on that right picture is a draft horse that I had for quite a while that did pretty well on the track, even with a lot of damage to his feet. But he would get up, to a high trot and even canter short distances, even as old as he was and as damaged as he was. Put piles of hay here and there, keep that ground and that track loosened up like that. You can see the tracks sort of gone back and forth in there to loosen up that ground just a little bit to make it a good surface. Some of the best surfaces to have your horses on is a surface that leaves behind a very pretty hoof print. If you want to know whether or not something is about right, look and see whether or not they can leave a hoof print. If they're not, it's too hard. If it's too soft and it kind of caves in, like if it's too deep a sand, then that's too soft. So in general, the kind of terrain that serves the hoof the best is the kind that leaves a nice hoof print behind. Next slide. So we know that adding space gets horses to move, and the more they move, the more steps they're taking. Every time that hoof flies through the air and hits the ground, there's blood coming in and out of that hoof. It's the action of walking and the action of the horse's hoof hitting the ground and releasing from the ground which drives circulation. It also causes wear or exfoliation. The horses that can do a little bit of wear on their own feet start to be very sound. If you have to do every little thing for a horse when you're trimming them, they're not moving enough. We need to see something on the bottom of that hoof that is wearing on its own. Horses that move more are happier. It's more stimulating to their whole body, their mind, the enrichment that they get from the ability to move is magical. And the whole horse's body and their hooves respond to the environment. How much room, how far can they see, how much do they have food available, do they have other horses around. All of these things are stimulating the horse to get closer to their nature in order to have healthy bodies from the ground up, basically. You can't get away from this. So whatever you can do in your limited space, if you have limited space, start to research track systems. Start to research how you can use electric tape to get a horse to go the long way around, for example. So don't underestimate how powerful this is. Next slide. So horses not only evolved on the move, but as a herd. It's inappropriate to think of a horse as an I. This is hard for us to do because of the nature of who we are as more predatory or more hunter-gatherer part of our evolution. Horses never evolved that way. They always evolved within a group. So it's we and us, not you and me. Horses look like a school of fish when they're moving across the landscape if you watch them enough, or a flock of birds in the sky. If you watch horses in a herd moving across the landscape, it's a beautiful sight. They have this consciousness amongst all of them. So I'm going to tell you, just point blank again, that your solitary horse is not going to be as healthy, period. Horses need other horses, or at least other equines. Number one best situation is other horses. So I have seen horses that I have rehabilitated suddenly turn a huge corner and get so much better when I get the herd dynamic right. When I get the kind of horses with them that they are stimulating to them, all of a sudden their mind is not on their feet or their leg or their lameness problem. All of a sudden it's on, wow, I have a herd, and here we go. We're off to go get water, or we're off to go down the track to look for that pile of hay. So don't keep horses solitary if at all possible. Very, very important. Next slide. So here's comparison between horses that move and horses that don't. Horses that move have, a healthy, shiny, vibrant look about them, and horses that don't, oftentimes they're underweight or more often get to be obese. They'll develop a crest. They'll develop, a big belly and a lot of fat deposits around their body, and that's unhealthy. They can even get fat deposited in their liver, which slows down their liver metabolism. Active horses utilize the forage more completely because there's demand on it. Whereas horses that don't move enough but have lots and lots of feed, there's an excess amount of energy always there in the gut, therefore an excess amount of heat, therefore it can lead to inflammation, and it can lead to metabolic stress. The insulin curve, insulin is this hormone that allows us to use our sugars and proteins and fats from our diet. If you look at the insulin curve in horses that are on a grass-based diet and moving a lot, it's very slowly undulating, versus horses that get fed hotter feeds and more meal-type situation. Their insulin curve is like a roller coaster, way up and way down, way up and way down. This is stress on the metabolism, and it also starts to release stress hormone. So overall metabolism of horses that are active is strong, where inactive horses get more inflamed and end up with these excesses, excess body condition, excess heat, inflammation. This weakens their body, and it shows up in their hooves, just plain as day. You see the ridges, you see the evidence of the laminitis, the inflammation inside the hooves. Gets to be very, very apparent. I can look at pictures that people send me of horses' hooves, and I can tell you a lot about how much that horse moves or doesn't move, their diet, etc. So next slide. Varied terrain is important, and when you have a habitat for your horse, this can be fun. You can start to put gravel in certain areas, and you can put rocks in certain areas, some sand over here to roll in, some areas that are a little wetter, a little drier. Hills are great, even if it's just a couple of dump truck loads of dirt or something for horses to run up and down. They love that. Having lots of opportunities to turn corners and have obstacles is very enriching too. So you want an engaging, enriched environment, and the opposite of that would be keeping horses on one kind of footing all the time, like all pea gravel or all sand or all dirt, all one hardness. That gets to be monotonous, and it starts to show up in their hooves as an inability to compensate when they get on anything else. So this is a really good slide to help me remind you to introduce some variety into your horse's terrain. You don't want it too hard, too dry, too wet. It's like Goldilocks. This one's too hard, this one's too dry, this one's just right. It also helps you monitor your horses. If you see your horse standing on the softest place he can find all the time, you might have something up. You might have some inflammation in the feet or something going on. You want the horse to engage with the environment. Fully half the equation in hoof care is the terrain. You see, for every force there is an equal and opposite force. So don't get so tunnel visioned on the hoof that you miss the terrain. It's fully half of the equation, because what shapes a hoof is how it engages the earth. So this is the horse and earth equation that we're talking about here. Environmental, confinement again is claustrophobic to horses. Some horses in big areas will make straight lines to and from the water to where you put the hay, and they won't even utilize this other big space. And so this is where it's important to add, some electric tape to make them go different areas, or make them go a different direction, or open a different gate. Mix it up for them. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch them figure it out. Next slide. So we talk a lot about nutrition and feeding and metabolic changes in horses. And the reason I'm talking about this is because it translates directly to their feet. So we talk about using hay nets and slow feeders because we want horses going from feeder to feeder. I do not like to see water right next to your feed. Put it as far from your feet as possible. Eating in horses is very herd-oriented. That very calming hormones that circulate in horses that can eat together with other horses. Don't underestimate that. So you need to have multiple piles of hay out there and multiple slow feeders to accommodate your horses. Horses that are fed, just piles of hay oftentimes bolt their food and don't chew it as well. And this can really end up like eating a big meal all of a sudden, and it causes that insulin curve to be steeper, like that roller coaster again. So this is a pitch for slow feeders and spending time nibbling. All this, horses are very oral creatures, so that a lot of lip movement and a lot of biting and nipping and pulling with their lips and teeth. Horses that move more have a digestive system that moves more. That's why with your colicky horse, sometimes it helps to walk them to get that gut to move a little bit. I'm a huge proponent of grass-based nutrition. Horses that are on alfalfa and grain and sweet feed and any molasses, I will not take them for rehabilitation. I will not, because I'm defeated. I cannot trim my way out of a problem when a horse is getting that kind of excessive nutrition. Horses evolved to eat grass. So do your own research on this. Horses are grass-based diet eaters. This makes for the densest, most healthy hoof you could ever want. It's a beautiful thing. I can cure lameness over the phone when I say, okay, don't feed that horse alfalfa or any sweet feed anymore. And they call me in 2 days and the horse is walking 100% better. Why? Because of an inflammatory diet. Other things that happen in horses that don't have slow feeders, they start to get aggressive around food. This is metabolic stress again, which can cause ulcers and gas pockets and colic. I get a lot of horses with psychological issues around food because they are always looking for that next meal. They run out of their alfalfa usually. I can tell you something funny about my horses. If I give my horses alfalfa, I'm not going to be riding them that day because they're going to be, it's toxic to their brain. It's remarkable. I'm going to get some video one of these days of what alfalfa will do to my horses that are on a grass-based diet. So big hint there. The kinds of hoof that grows from horses on inappropriate diet is also poor. They're soft, they are inflamed, not well connected. So diet is huge, huge. Next slide. Okay, this is a cool subject because I'm paying more and more attention to teeth in horses, and this is very cool because think about it. We feed our horses hay or whatever we feed them, and they're chewing that food up with their back teeth, so they are wearing their back teeth some. But they're not wearing their front teeth, right? Because they're not ripping and tearing that grass off the ground. So most all of our domestic horses have incisors that are overgrown. They're not wearing at the rate that the chewing teeth or the molars and premolars are wearing. Add to that the way most veterinarians and equine dentists address the teeth. They bypass the incisors and go right to the back teeth and start filing back there even more. So now you're even more out of balance. You should be addressing these incisors first before you do anything in the rear of the mouth. So what we're seeing is temporomandibular joint issues, very imbalanced, a lot of frustration and pain associated in horses that have long front teeth compared to their back teeth. This affects their whole body. I can show you horses that won't pick up a certain lead or just look like they're dizzy because they can't get their back teeth balanced and together. This is very cool. I'm going to show you some pictures coming up, but if all of our horses could graze, they would keep their front teeth balanced so much more. So the dentistry is getting really, really exciting. We're talking about really looking at balance in the temporomandibular joint, really looking at the freedom of movement around the horse's poll, which translates down through their neck and shoulders and pelvis. These horses become more animated, they back up easier, they move forward more willingly, and their hoof balance starts to become more symmetrical. Let's look at the next slide and see if I have an example coming up. I know I do at some point, but I can start to see differences in hooves depending on what teeth look like. This is a couple of videos. See if you can play the video, which shows how that moves. Depending on your computer, you may see the movement or not. But as you move a horse's jaw side to side, you should see that separation like that. So you can get your horse to do this.
Is the other one?
Yeah, you can click the other one too, and watch the movement. Okay. There's movement front to back. So depending on your connection and whatnot, you'll see the movement of the teeth going forward and back. That's called anterior-posterior movement. So this is easy to check. Your horse, you have to warm up to them. Don't get overly aggressive with this. But if your horse's front teeth are too long, when you when you move their lower jaw side to side, you won't see that separation come into their front teeth. So when they're centered, they're together, apart, together, apart, together, apart. If you don't see that, you have incisors that are too long. So I have more discussion on that on my Facebook page if you want to see it again, or if you want to look at the videos again, it's on my Facebook page. So this is an example of nice incisor balance in this horse that I had just worked on. So go to the next slide and see what else I have on teeth. Here's an example of a horse. You're looking at the front teeth. Notice on the lower teeth to the right side how they're shifted over. Look at the center gum line from top to bottom. You see the position of the lower jaw off to the horse's left side? Now this is that horse's front feet on that right picture. And the right front foot has got a higher heel, and the left front hoof has a more normal, more healthy conformation to that foot. Can you see that? About 70 to 80% of the time, if you see a horse with one foot that is more clubby or has a higher heel versus the other one, you will see a horse's lower jaw going away from that. So horses take their lower jaw and they chew to the side that they're more sound on. This is becoming something that we can predict about 70 to 80% of the time. So in this horse, the left front hoof is more sound and a better hoof. The right front has had issues long term. And look at this horse's front teeth. He's taking that lower jaw to his left. He's chewing more on his left side. So this is the connection between teeth and feet. And it's very cool. Yeah, I get all excited about this because I can come back in 6 months to a year and start to see changes in the feet by fixing the teeth. So dental is real big. Go to the next slide, and I think I show what I did to the teeth just to straighten them out. And I'm using hand tools to file the front teeth. You can see that got a more straight line. So you can see on the top where there's a gap now. So I filed down those lower incisors that used to occupy that space up high. So this is going to allow those upper incisors to grow down where they should be growing down to. And as you know, horses' teeth are constantly growing and constantly wearing. So within a year, those teeth are going to maintain themselves. And look at the alignment from the top center gum line to the bottom center gum line now. It's more aligned because I've freed up that movement side to side. So that's just a picture of the horse there on the right. Next slide. Your dental work should always start with the front teeth, folks. That's a take-home message there. If your dentist is not doing it, ask them about it respectfully. Don't blame them for not doing that, but ask them if they're willing to look into that. Okay, this is where you are going to know more all of a sudden about balancing your horse's mouth than maybe your veterinarian or your dentist. But they should be starting to look at the front teeth first. So good luck with that. Be respectful with the people that are helping you and just ask questions. More on nutrition looks like. I already talked about this a little bit, grass versus alfalfa. Supplements that complement your hay. Do you test your hay? Do you know whether or not you're low in zinc or copper or selenium? Maybe you're high in magnesium and low in copper. Maybe your supplement ought to reflect that. This translates directly to how healthy your horse's gut is. This translates directly to inflammation again. So we see horses' hooves look so much better when we get them on a grass-based diet. This is one of the biggest reasons horses can't go barefoot, folks. is because of an inappropriate diet. They have inflammation, the density is very poor, they have separation between their hoof wall and their coffin bone called laminitis or founder, and it's all largely related to diet and lack of movement and that herd health aspect, and a couple of other things. So can't tell you enough about researching this for yourself. Anything I tell you, you need to make this information your own. Don't take it from me. This is what I know works. This is important. The stuff that I'm telling you is very important. So research it and feel for yourself if it makes sense. Next slide. These are cadaver hooves, okay? These are hooves from a dead horse. On the left is the way I trimmed the one front hoof, the way I would trim it if I was going to leave this horse barefoot. You can see a roll around the edge. You can see how I left some dry material on the sole. I never trim so much off that it's all shiny all around. And then on the right, obviously, is the shod one. I actually shod a horse, Carole. I nailed a horse on a... I nailed a shoe on a horse, but it was a dead horse, so yeah.
Didn't feel a thing.
I didn't even clench the nails. You can see the nails sticking out of the hoof capsule there. So next slide. Notice that a normal hoof has an arch to it. Okay, it's not flat from toe to heel. So on that right picture, the hoof that is prepared for the shoe is not allowed to have an arch in it. So what an arch accomplishes for a horse is a springing action, and it allows for independent heel movement, side to side, up and down, in and out, front to back. A horse that does not have a natural arch built into their hoof is missing out big time on very healthy hoof function, circulation, sensation, and the ability to exfoliate and wear their hooves on their own a little bit. Okay, so big difference I wanted to show you in how a horse that's shod or prepared to be shod is not allowed to have an arch in their foot. And it's very normal for that to be there, and healthy for that to be there, and we want to see that. Healthy hooves have an arch to them. Next slide. So all of those structures are working, that frog and those heels. You can see I actually demonstrated how I open heels a little bit with my trimming tools on that left picture. Then on the right, if you place the shoe on there, it takes the sole and frog largely out of work. Horses in shoes long-term always end up with atrophy. Atrophy is a medical term for loss of structure or loss of mass of tissue. Horses that are shod for very long have smaller and smaller and smaller frogs over time because they're not working, they're not stimulated. Use it or lose it. So working structures on a horse get healthier, stronger, more dense, and work for the horse when they're allowed to work. So, having the shoe on that over there is going to disallow that hoof to work the way it does, the way it's supposed to work, I should say. Next slide. So these are more videos. If you go ahead and click on them and watch the movement, these are also on my Facebook page. But it's showing how each side of the hoof moves. These are soles that have been dissected off of those same cadaver limbs. Okay, I cut the soles right off, and I'm just moving it side to side, showing you how the nature of the material is such that it flexes a lot. Horses' hooves flex a lot. But with the presence of a shoe, of course, is not going to flex at all. And over time, that structure inside is not receiving the stimulation it needs. It's not getting the circulation it needs to stay healthy, and it gets more and more atrophied over time. That means loss of tissue. That means loss of blood supply. That means a horse loses track of what's going on in its hoof, and it loses a lot of animation. It loses a lot of ability to compensate. Horses have tons and tons of sensory nerves down on their feet because they need to feel what's going on. Next slide. Again, those videos are on my Facebook page if you want to see them again. So, who's on your team? Do you have a veterinarian and a farrier or a trimmer or a dentist or a trainer or a groom or hired people? Who's on your team? Do they trust the horse to be a horse? Do they consider the big picture? Do they consider the horse a partner or a slave? Do they respect what you want for your horse? And whose responsibility is it, after all, to get the best for your horse? That's you. It's not my responsibility. Ultimately, it's your responsibility to find people that respect the whole horse and respect what you want to develop with your horse. Do you want a partnership with your horse? If you do, I want to talk to you. If you don't, then we don't have a lot to talk about, and that's okay. But I have lots and lots of people who want to know more about what is this relationship you're talking about? What is this partnership you're talking about? You know, some people can't go there or even change because they can't admit to, doing things one way and then wanting to do it another way. So here's an example. I used to shoe horses. I used to put bits in horses' mouths. I used to ride horses like a banshee over terrain in an abusive way after cattle because I wanted to get a job done. I did that. I don't do that anymore because of what I've learned. Now, if I need a horse to go like a banshee over the rocks, I'm going to put a pair of boots on them, and I'm going to use a bitless bridle, and I'm going to take some little extra time to develop my relationship with my horse, and it's going to be fun. She likes to go after cows, and so do I. And now we can do it in a more of a partnership sort of a way, instead of me dictating everything to her. So this is about the big picture, folks. This is about asking the horse to heel, and allowing them to heel, not forcing it. You cannot force a horse to heel. If a horse heels, it's oftentimes despite your attempts to make the horse heel. So what I'm saying is all of the specialty shoeing, all of the prescription shoeing, all of the fancy impression material, egg bar shoes, junk. Absolute junk, because it's dictating to a horse and it's glossing over the real problem. These hooves are not getting healthier. They're getting worse. So that next year, now you're going to need clips. And then the next year, you're going to have impression material. Why? Why is the horse not getting better? Because you're dictating and you're focusing on a specific spot instead of the whole horse, you see? And, I'll hear somebody in a clinic say, and I've had 10 farriers, and I've had 3 veterinarians, and look at my horse. And I said, yeah, and you let them. You are responsible. You need to know this information. This information is out there. I can teach you how to have a healthier horse by just if you take half of what I've told you during this webinar and put it into play, promise you your horse is going to be healthier. So that's what I mean about really empowering yourself and really taking on the responsibility. Your horse is depending on you to do this. Next slide. So where are we going to go from here? We know the differences between healthy and unhealthy. We love to ask questions. I learn all the time. Whenever I do a clinic or a seminar or a workshop, I learn a ton of stuff. I am an eternal student for life, I promise you. I am also that annoying little boy that's going to go, why? Why are you doing that? Why do you do that? I have a lot of intuition around horses. I know what they're saying. I know what their body language means. And you know your horse as well. You know what it means when they stand a certain way or look at you a certain way. Tune into that. Trust them to communicate with you. Get people on your team that understand about working on incisors first when it comes to dentistry. Work with somebody who knows about grass-based nutrition for horses. Enjoy learning from your mistakes. So you didn't do it right. Oh, so what? What are you going to do now? See, I gave you an example of what it looks like to admit to how I used to do something and how I don't do it anymore. Do I sound like I'm all in shame about it? No, I didn't know. I didn't know. So what do I do now? I learn, and I do something better. And I love inviting my horses to work. This is such a kick in the pants to have horses love to do their job and love to be with you. And I would also just extend that invitation to you that I support you. I love you and your horses in this journey that you're on. I can help you, and others can help you too, because it's about having a healthier horse and a healthier relationship and for you to be happier. Bottom line. Next slide. If you go to Facebook and look under my Veterinary Insights page, it's Tomas G. Teskey Veterinary Insights. That is my email right there. That's my only email. And there it is for you. Send me a picture. Send me a question. Cry on my shoulder. Tell me a success story. I want to hear about it. I support you in what you're doing. Keep an eye out for seminars that we're going to do. Keep an eye out for more webinars that we're going to do. This is my life's work. This is my passion. And there's nothing else I would rather do than talk about horses and their feet and their teeth and the relationship with their people. So that's what I have for you tonight, and really enjoyed being here with you. And Carole, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Teskey. As always, I'm touched. It's a true inspiration what you're saying. I personally love the discussion of the collective consciousness of horses. It's so much easier than the me and you thing. Us is a very different, comforting concept. You've given us a lot to think about, not only about our horses, but the way that we approach things. You say, start to research. Just gently begin to research. And ask the people around you respectively. You don't have to accuse anyone of doing the wrong thing. Be gentle and be kind. And I know that some of our listeners may be thinking that the whole program is just a bit overwhelming right now. And
the thing is, you now know you have lots of support. And Dr. Teskey has offered his individual attention, which is really above and beyond. Thank you, Dr. Teskey. So if you get stuck, you can reach out to him and reach out to us here at Cavallo. Because we too are here to support you. And I hope that you, if you've already realized the benefits of Barefoot, were able to pick up something of value during our webinar today. Even one little thing can make a huge difference. I've been in this area of horsemanship for about 15 years, and I'm constantly learning, particularly when I listen to you, Dr. Teskey. I'm certain our listeners have found this as inspirational as I have. And for those of you not quite sure about making the leap and pulling off those metal shoes and moving into a barefoot program, please be aware of the invaluable benefit of hoof boots. as Dr. Teskey says, boots provide comfort for horses. So if you're moving into consideration of hoof boots, I personally ask that you consider Cavallo boots to be your boot of choice. And it's not just because I'm president of Cavallo. I really and truly believe that we offer you the very best boot on the market. They're easy to put on, they stay on, they're easy to take off, and you can ride through any terrain without a worry. And so that means, the best value for your money and durable comfort and protection for your horse. Okay, so there is a few minutes left, and let's move into some questions, Thomas.
Oh boy, got lots of good comments here, Thomas. They love you.
I love them too.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Why do mules need rockier ground? From Adrienne.
Great question. Give a pile of rocks to a mule and or a donkey, and you have a happy mule and a happy donkey. Just try it. So look at the different shape. We have different shape hoof in donkeys versus horses. They're more compact and more upright, straight-sided, more cylindrically shaped rather than cone-shaped, and very, very substantial amount of frog and soft tissue. Donkeys evolved on the rocks. They like to live in rocky areas. They don't run away from predators that far. If they get chased, they turn around and kick and bite and strike. Horses keep running. So it's a whole different animal. Give rocks and give rocky areas for your donkeys and or mules, and just trust me, they'll oftentimes gravitate to those areas. It's part of their inheritance and how they evolved and where they evolved on the landscape.
Okay. And this is from Dida. How wide do you make the tracks? When you talk about the herd, the same can be achieved by close proximity with other horses. So I think the question is, how wide should these tracks be on the sides of the pastures?
I prefer at least 16 feet of width, so that and with the safest kind of fencing that you can buy. And that allows for horses to squirt by or get by or get out of the way. But if you can go at least 16 feet wide, that's great.
When you say a football field is a good size, or a half a football field is a good size, how many horses are you referring to?
Well, I like to see at least 4 horses in a herd. If you're going to ask me minimum herd size, I would like to see 4 horses, but if you have 2 is a herd. And as far as the amount of space, it's basically the amount of space that is conducive to getting those horses to play, to walk, trot, canter, turn, kick up their heels, buck and snort and twirl around and roll without getting caught, up against a fence or, too close of confinement. No claustrophobic type structures. So a lot of times you can have an arena attached to a round pen through a track system. And, so while they're in the track, they got to kind of go one way or the other. But when they're in their arena or bigger area, this is the area where they can, sprint around a little bit. But so that's my determining factor. There is enough room to run and turn, and so that's at least 150 to 200 feet square, ideally.
Right. Okay, I think here's one last one. I hope it's not going to be too complex. Very simple question, though. If grass hay is indicated over alfalfa, where do you rate Timothy?
Timothy oftentimes is quite a bit more protein and some different carbohydrate and protein ratios that you'll find versus Bermuda, but it is a grass. Timothy is a grass, and I would just definitely tell people to put Timothy in a slow feeder, in a hay bag, a hay net, with small holes. I like to see horses work for it and nibble, 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 and so you might watch out for some strains and or some cuttings of Timothy that are quite energy rich. I have definitely seen horses with laminitis on Timothy. So you know what will prevent any laminitis from setting in though? Keeping your horse moving. If a horse that moves will not get laminitis or founder if they move enough. Movement mitigates just about every problem you could ever have in a horse. And I don't say that lightly, but more movement, you get away with it. So they need a job, they need a track, they need to keep moving.
Right. Okay, well, thanks again, Dr. Teskey, and we'll say good night now, and thank you, Cavallo community, for being here, and you'll be receiving your invitation to our next webinar very soon. Good night.
Good night.